the UFO deception has been exploding across the globe, especially in the last 2 months. And that happens to be the very 2 months since I released my book warning about that very thing and refuting it in advance. For example, in the last 3 weeks, we've had the two biggest podcasts in the world, Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, both having on David Grush, the so-called whistleblower, who is saying that aliens are among us, and don't miss this, and that this means a new era of spiritual awakening, where we finally don't have to wonder about our place in the cosmos any longer. And that's just scratching the surface. Stay tuned for more. So not only is this UFO deception suddenly getting more exposure than ever before, it's also getting explicitly apocalyptic, explicitly messianic, of course, with a pseudo-messianism that has nothing to do with the one and only Messiah, Jesus Christ. It's a secular messianism, precisely what the Catechism warned against as a harbinger of the Antichrist himself. And this deception is infiltrating the Catholic Church ferociously. If this is the great deception heralding the Antichrist, as is my thesis, then what we're seeing now is exactly what we should have long expected. So I'm going to talk about all that today in this video, and there's a lot more to go over. A lot of very important developments to go over in just the last few weeks, than beyond just Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Grush. But first, let's talk about my book a bit. I've already appeared on several podcasts, and quite a few of them, talking about this, but this is my first video for my own channel here since my book was released. And the title of the book says it all. Only man bears his image. In other words, human beings, descendants of Adam and Eve, are the only incarnate creatures in existence who have reason. No exceptions, zero exceptions. We are the only creatures that God made, the only material, that is, corporeal creatures that God made with reason. The only creatures in general that God made with reason are men and angels, as the unanimous consensus of the entirety of 2,000 years of sacred tradition has always held, as I demonstrate in one of my chapters in the book. So that's it, men and angels. All right, that is a fact. You will find that fact demonstrated in this book. I'm not asking anyone to take my word for it, because I'm no one special. Don't, as I've said before, don't believe anything just because I say it. Believe it if I present an argument demonstrating that it is true. And that's exactly what you'll find in this book. You'll find proof from the Old Testament that there are no aliens. You'll find proof from the New Testament that there are no aliens. You'll find proof from the fathers of the church that there are no aliens. Proof from the magisterium that there are no aliens. Proof from sacred tradition, the sensus fidelium, the infallible sensus fidelium, that there are no aliens. And even proof from private revelation that there are no aliens. And of course, proof from purely secular science that there are no aliens. And that certainly there are none and never will be any here on Earth. Okay. Now, I know you have a lot of questions now that I've just laid it out for you, the thesis of this 757 or so page book. First, isn't it limiting God to say that we human beings are the only corporeal creatures made in his image? And the answer is no, you're not. I've got sections on that. You might be wondering, doesn't the Vatican say that Catholicism is completely fine with believing in aliens? And the answer is no. The Vatican does not say this. A few men in collars in the Vatican have said that, and I show in this book just how incredibly wrong they are. It's the same type of deceptions we've been seeing coming not from the magisterium, that's divinely protected, but from individual men in the Vatican. There's not the only deception coming from there recently. Anyway, you'll want to see my sections in the book on that. Another question you might have: didn't Padre Pio believe in aliens? Didn't Pope John Paul II believe in aliens? And the answer is absolutely no. You have been repeatedly lied to, bald-faced lies about this. Catholic alien promoters in the last couple of years especially, they've been going in overdrive promoting these lies. I did an especially deep dive into the Padre Pio claim in this book. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you might have already seen my video about the claim that Padre Pio believed in aliens. I did a refutation of that already, but I have a much deeper dive than I provided in that video into the Padre Pio question. Maybe in the future I'll go into more detail here on YouTube. For now, I just want to do a broad overview, but again, you'll find it definitively refuted. This idea that Padre Pio believed in aliens, it's complete nonsense. You might be wondering, what about Nephilim? What about the mark of Cain in Genesis 6 and Genesis 4, respectively? Neither of these things have anything to do with what the Catholic alien belief promoters have been telling you. Not even close. They have been lying to you about that as well. What you might be wondering, what about Saint Jerome? Didn't he believe in satyrs and other non-human intelligences? And the answer is no, he didn't. You've been lied to about that as well. What about Monsignor Corrado Balducci, the Vatican theologian, priest, exorcist, who's going across the world in the 90s and early 2000s saying that there's aliens and Catholicism's fine with them? Shouldn't we believe in them because he believed in them? And the answer is no. He is the opposite of reliable. This is one of the biggest lies you've been told by the Catholic alien belief promoters. And no one has done a deep dive into this individual's deception before this book. I guess the clericalism runs deep. Some people seem to think that anyone in a collar with a doctorate in sacred theology is infallible, and that idea is leading a lot of souls to hell. And I do a deep dive into the diabolical deceptions of Monsignor Corrado Balducci. You have no idea how delusional, how deeply diabolically deceptive this man was. You'll see it detailed in this book. Anyway, I answer all those questions and 1,000 more in this book in great, great detail. I've read all the books by all the Catholic alien belief promoters out there. Of course, I am well aware of the fact that they make various attempts to claim that they can reconcile their views with Scripture and magisterium and sacred tradition. All of those attempts I've refuted in the book as well. I've gone several layers deep in this, and that's why it is such a big book. But fear not, you don't have to read it cover to cover to get a lot of valuable content from it. You've got a extremely detailed table of contents in the book. Page after page after page of table of contents. So you'll be able to very easily find the specific answers to the specific questions you have from that. You can use this as a reference work. Have it on your desk for when this great deception becomes even greater, which is happening before our eyes. You'll be able to have the individual questions you have as they arise answered by just checking the table of contents, even if you're not interested in reading such a big book cover to cover. But let's get to the subtitle now. I said a minute ago, the title says it all. Only man bears his image, and it does. But the subtitle is also pretty big. It may be the longest subtitle you've come across in a while. The biblical, Catholic, and scientific case against aliens, UFO deception, sentient AI, and other sci-fi disguised demons and psyops heralding the Antichrist. And that's what I really want to discuss today. Parts 1, 2, and 3 of the book present the definitive logical argument against aliens, whether theological, scientific, philosophical, scriptural, magisterial, whatever. You'll find it all settled in there. Part 4, though, gets into the later part of the subtitle about the demons in disguise heralding the Antichrist, because that's where it gets unbelievably dark. And I get into that in part 4 of the book. Too many Catholics have been burying their heads in the sand about this, which is really such a tragedy. Quite a number of Eastern Orthodox priests have done a great job warning against the UFO deception. A number of evangelical authors have done a great job warning against the UFO deception. But with mainstream Catholic authors in recent decades, almost all of them have just gobbled up this deception. A lot of them have even promoted it as their own belief, and they continue to do so to this day. In fact, more zealously than ever, as this is making headlines more than ever. And this is really inexcusable. Because even if we, for just a moment, leave aside all the theological and scientific reasons we have to absolutely reject, not just be suspicious of, but as you'll see in the book, absolutely reject the proposition that aliens exist, even if we leave all that aside and just stick with spiritual discernment, the spiritual discernment that our Lord Jesus Christ exhorts us to, which is what? You know the tree by its fruits. Judge the tree by its fruits. On that count alone, we can be absolutely certain, if God is God, and if Jesus is God, which he is, and he meant what he said, that you know a tree by its fruits, then on this count alone, we can be absolutely certain that this whole alien belief phenomenon is diabolical and rotten to the core. And this has become so obvious with each passing year for the last 76 years. It has produced increasingly rotten, diabolical, dark, apocalyptic fruits, getting worse and worse as those years have progressed. A mountain of them, as you'll see detailed, the worst of them detailed in this book. If I went through all of them, it wouldn't have been a 757-page book. It would have been a million-page book. So it's got all of these completely rotten fruits, a mountain of them, and not a single good one. Never has the alien belief phenomenon produced a single good fruit. But what we're at right now, at this moment, it's becoming, it's arriving even more quickly than I would have guessed, actually. But this moment, it seems we're approaching the climax of this demonic avalanche of fruits of this whole alien belief phenomenon. You can summarize it as the UFO deception. All right, I don't want to go through everything in this video that I already have in the book. You can see it in there. Today, I just want to talk about what has happened in the 2 months, the mere several weeks since I published this book. I knew this deception was going to pick up speed very soon. Throughout the book, I discuss how dark this deception already had become and has become, and I repeatedly warn in the book that it's about to get worse, and it's about to infiltrate the church even more than it already has. And since I published the book, it surprised even me with the ferocity and the velocity that those two that trend has picked up. What we've seen in just the last several weeks, the deception is here. We might only be moments away from the diabolical day of disclosure itself. You know, the day where they claim, where the government officially declares that the aliens are here, that they're in contact with aliens, that they've been in contact with them for all these decades. The day of disclosure that the ufologists have been fighting for decades now. So let's talk about just the last several weeks since this book came out. Let's start with Professor, the big shot Harvard physicist, astrophysicist, Avi Loeb. He has been, for many years, on a crusade to prove that aliens exist. But in this last year especially, even before this book came out, in the last year especially, he's shot to global renown because of his claims that he discovered alien technology undersea somewhere. And people have been gobbling this up. It made global headlines. So now he's a total celebrity. He's one of the biggest names in this whole movement today. And it's not surprising to see why. A Harvard physicist saying he found alien tech, saying that one of the asteroids that were also the supposed alien tech he found, it since came out. It was industrial waste. Of course, those revelations did not make the headlines like his original discovery of alien technology. But anyway, my goal is not to spend a bunch of time disproving each of those obviously bogus claims. They're obviously bogus. The point is looking at what is happening sociologically, looking at what is happening in the world and tragically in the church as a result of all this. So here's Avi Loeb. He says, and this was in November of this year, 2023. He wrote publicly, he declared extraterrestrials could save humanity. The geopolitical world we live in needs repair. Throughout history, humans have hoped for a messianic age of peace and prosperity. My take is that the Messiah will not arrive riding on a donkey, as suggested in Zechariah 9:9, but instead might be riding on a spacecraft from an exoplanet. That is a direct quote from Avi Loeb, the global celebrity now, declaring explicitly, messianically, and I mean explicitly, he's using the word itself right there. He's declaring that the Messiah is coming. And guess what? Avi Loeb, he's a Jew. So he knows to be waiting for the Messiah. That his people have been waiting for that for thousands and thousands of years. They've been waiting for the coming of the Messiah. And of course, any Christian, anyone who has accepted the truth about the Messiah realizes the Messiah has already come. Jesus Christ came 2,000 years ago. But the Antichrist will indeed claim to be the Messiah. Declarations such as this is not some fringe voice. This is not some random blogger online. This is as influential a voice as they come, declaring that the Messiah will soon arrive on a spacecraft. And he is phrasing, I mean, with sayings like this, you are explicitly laying out the red carpet for the Antichrist. I mean, you can't imagine a more problematic thing to say. And this wasn't even just some random remark from Avi Loeb. He reiterated the exact same thing a couple weeks later. You can find it on his own website at medium.com. He wrote that he reiterated in a letter to the president of Harvard, I believe it was, in light of all the controversy going on with the congressional hearing. He found and he's a Harvard professor, so this is a big deal. He's writing an open letter to the president of Harvard, and he ends the letter with what? Yet another declaration that the Messiah is coming that a extraterrestrial race is coming to save humanity. An extraterrestrial race coming to save humanity. He is going to announce it to us. He believes, at least. Now, I mentioned at the start of this video that this has been infiltrating the Catholic Church. In fact, that's what originally inspired me to write this book, seeing not just how much this deception was infiltrating the world, but how much it was infiltrating the church and voices that you may previously have thought you could trust. And you might be thinking, okay, well, Professor Loeb, he's a Jew. You don't expect Catholic orthodoxy from him. Okay, well, let's take a look at what the most prominent Catholic voices in this arena are saying. It's because it's exploding there as well. Recently, the last couple months since I released this book as well, I didn't know this was going to happen, but suddenly a big shot Catholic priests, theologian, exorcists have been publishing all these videos promoting the extraterrestrial deception. Not a single thing stated there is anything other than what I've already refuted in the book, so no need to go into detail on that. But just today I received an email from someone, and I get emails like this all the time. I get attacked for this all the time. But he called me he said I was guilty of blasphemy. I'm a blasphemer for not believing in aliens. I'm a sinner and a blasphemer because I don't believe in aliens, he told me, because by not believing in aliens, I am, guess what? Limiting God. Which probably is what you guessed if you said anything out loud right there. That's what we hear most frequently, isn't it? If we don't believe in aliens, we're limiting God. How dare we limit God? And I've got a whole section in the book, a couple sections actually, a section in the main part of the book and an appendix on this, because it's one of the most common objections given against those who do not believe in aliens, but it's also one of the most utterly absurd things you could possibly say about this. As I show in the book, you're limiting God by believing in aliens, because you're claiming he's too stupid or short-sighted to mean exactly what he said in divine revelation. So you're limiting God by believing in aliens, not the other way around. But anyway, so this person emailed me today calling me a blasphemer by saying aliens don't exist, and he said instead of saying that, I should read the esteemed Catholic scholars on this question. Esteemed Catholic scholars like Diana Pasulka is who he said that I should be deferring to. And indeed, she's become one of the most famous ufologists today, promoting that she's millions upon millions of views for her various podcasts and videos, her books. She's got multiple books on this that have been bestsellers, just exploding throughout the world. And yes, she is a proud Orthodox Catholic, which I'll put in air quotes there. She's all over the internet, everywhere. And of course, she manages to remind her audiences every 5 minutes or so that she is a religious studies professor. And by the way, I'll just sneak in here a little remark. Anyone who appeals to their own authority, anyone who feels the need to regularly remind you of their resume, there's no good reason to do that. Somebody is only doing that because he realizes the arguments that he presents are bogus. And he knows he's lying to you. So instead of addressing the arguments that refute him, which he knows he can't do, he instead tries to dismiss them with ad hominems, because the people presenting those arguments, they don't have doctorates in sacred theology or or whatever that they have. Anyway, always be on guard when someone feels the need to constantly bring up his resume. That's always a sign of deception. All right, back to Pasulka here. Anyone who thinks this isn't a big deal, that this issue about extraterrestrials, oh yeah, it's just one of a million things you can believe whatever you want on as a Catholic. Anyone who thinks that about this need look no further than what Diana Pasulka is saying openly, unashamedly, year after year, for several years now. So let's take a look, and I'm not interested in digging up dirt on anyone. That's not what I'm into here. I'm just looking at what people themselves are publicly saying. If I can't take issue with what somebody is publicly saying to millions and millions of people going viral on the internet, then what can I do? And if you take a look at what this proudly Orthodox Catholic religious studies professor is saying in promoting this UFO deception, if you're not waking up, then I don't know what's going to wake you up. So let's take a look at this. So here is her most recent video that I'm aware of, at least. I can't say I follow her closely, but this one came across my radar with a YouTuber named Jesse Michaels, I'm not sure. He recently interviewed David Grush himself, the famous whistleblower, saying that aliens are here. We'll address him later. Anyway, that got millions of views. As you can see here on your screen, this interview with Pasulka is only a few days old. It's already gotten over 500,000 views. And let's see how he introduces it. And you might not see right off the bat how problematic this is, but you will in just a minute as we continue on here.
Interview our next guest since I started American Alchemy a couple of years ago. Her book was perhaps the biggest catalyst for my early interest in UFOs. Her name is mentioned in literally every interview I've done. Diana Pasulka. Diana Pasulka. Diana Pasulka.
All right, let's pause it there. I can't take much more of that. So there's the man himself with Grush. So this Diana Pasulka has been his biggest inspiration, it seems. And nothing wrong with that in and of itself until you see what type of inspiration this individual has been receiving from this renowned Orthodox Catholic scholar. And I'm not trying to pick on her here. She's coming across my radar all the time. I didn't ask for any of this. I have got all these other Catholics gobbling up everything she writes, thinking, okay, she's a Catholic scholar. She's got PhD. She's a professor. She must know what she's talking about. Well, let's see the fruits of this. And not only the fruits, but what she herself is saying. So this guy, his Pasulka is like his idol. She's the only one he's mentioned on every single podcast, he seems to be saying. And finally, he got her to come on to the podcast. And let's see what is said on this podcast. Okay. So one of the first things here, Pasulka does...
sound like the official versions of the story.
Get away with a great deal.
Oh, they're playing an ad for us. All right, well, let me mute that and play through the ad here. And what Pasulka's saying, because of her own original translation, she's able to basically rewrite sacred history for us, which is the most oldest trick in the book. For a modernist, they just claim that they've translated the originals themselves and come to a completely different conclusion than the church has always taught and the saints have always understood. What does she do that with respect to here? You'll guess it just fine. She finds a way to turn our sacred, venerable tradition into a big UFO deception, which she is very happy about. Let's take a look.
Take St. Francis of Assisi, a 12th century Italian friar. The popular narrative is that St. Francis saw Christ under the appearance of a seraph or angel on Mount Laverna in Italy. But the first English translations of this experience from Thomas of Solano don't mention anything about Christ. Instead, the original translations describe Francis encountering a sound and fury, atmospheric sparks, and a flaming torch. Telepathic communication between Francis and the torch occurs, in which Francis is treated harshly and wounded with rays of light that rip through his hands. Francis's wounds get interpreted as Christ's stigmata.
This looks very similar to things that people talk about today.
Radiation damage.
Yeah.
Could this be the same radiation damage that occurs in what we now call UFO experiences?
Pause it right there. So with Pasulka, everything is done from the perspective of plausible deniability in the future. She seems to want to get away from this eventually, so she phrases things as questions. And I'm just studying this as a professor, and she knows exactly what she's doing. And her followers, there are millions of followers, know exactly what she's doing. She's promoting this. This idea that, oh, the narrative, in other words, sacred tradition for 800 years now since St. Francis, the narrative says that St. Francis' stigmata are about Jesus Christ. But actually, if you look at my translations of the originals, you see that this is about UFOs. This is about the stigma. They were radiation damage, and how puerile these interpretations are is really astounding, especially for a religious study scholar who evidently has no idea how the church discerns extraordinary phenomena. Her thesis is basically just a reiteration of Jacques Vallée's from the 1960s and 70s, and he's still alive today promoting it. This idea that anything that appears above you and involves light is just a UFO. And they're trying to rewrite the Bible itself and 2,000 years of sacred tradition, and full of miracles, of course, which they try to say, oh no, that was all just paranormal stuff, and paranormal stuff is all itself just UFOs. Now, this is an attempt to rewrite everything. This is not just some little lie. Not that any lie is little. All lies are evil. This is an attempt to completely undermine and rewrite the essence of the faith. And they admit as much in this very video here. So let me fast forward ahead. They say we are finally now getting to the real root of religion. Up to this point, for all of salvation history and church history, we've just been in Plato's cave. We've just been looking at the shadows in the wall that the puppet masters are making. And then, I teach Plato's cave every semester also. But anyway, it's a fun thing to teach, and it's got some good morals of the story. But Pasulka here and this man Jesse is taking it as a way to claim that all of human history, most significantly sacred history, has been just staring at the shadows in the wall of Plato's cave. Now that we're understanding UFOs and extraterrestrials, now we can get to the root layer of religion, as you see here. Let me play this for just a few more seconds here.
Religion, understanding its proto-architecture, its universal, timeless nature.
Maybe we're looking at the source code.
The point is,
And there's Grush himself saying we're looking at the source code of it all. If you thought David Grush was just some random, honest veteran wanting disclosure, you're deluded. Look at what he himself is saying, as I hope I get time to do later in this video. He is, as I said in the beginning, also, as I alluded to in the beginning, explicitly apocalyptic. This is not about disclosure of some classified information for him. This is about a false messianism, as it always is. All of this extraterrestrial expectation, all this extraterrestrial belief, it's not benign. It is all about a false pseudo-messianism, an expectation that we will be saved by the extraterrestrials, an expectation of salvation that has nothing to do with the one and only valid, true source of that, our Lord Jesus Christ. All right, continuing on here.
we're all getting a little closer to the light, seeing beyond the shadows of Plato's cave. And Diana is helping us get there. So on that note, please...
So it's not, it's not scripture, it's not the saints, it's not church teaching, it's not any of that helps you to finally see beyond Plato's cave. It is the ufologists. And I don't want to single out Pasulka here. She's just one of many, but she's currently the most prominent Orthodox Catholic making the rounds with this. This is what all the ufologists are saying. It's all about, quote, ontological shock. That is their substitute for grace. As I talk about in the book, everything about ufology apes authentic religion. For every major facet of the true faith, ufology has its own parody of that. Ontological shock is their pseudo grace, and this is they believe we're on the cusp of it now. All right, let's fast forward to the next section here. So Pasulka, of course, Catholic, she has to acknowledge the existence of angels and demons as well. So she'll occasionally say the word demon, but never actually taking demons seriously, never actually considering maybe everything I'm doing, maybe all that I'm doing is just promoting the doctrines of demons here. She never seems to go that far. But she'll briefly mention them, and it's very interesting, I should say telling, the context in which she does so here. Let's take a look.
Angels and demons, what does this have to do with modern ufology?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a scene in Encounters.
Yes.
Where I'm having lunch with Jacques Vallée. So we're in his study, and it's really amazingly beautiful here in the Bay Area. And he starts to explain a couple of things to me, and I notice a bunch of books on shelves, and I notice those things, right?
Yeah.
So I go and I start to look to see what he has on this one shelf, and then he takes one of the books off, and it was a book about angels. he says, of course, you can't have one without the other, right? And so we went out and had some coffee and pastries in his living room. And so we talked, and he asked me what I learned from Tyler. He said, what did we learn from Tyler? And at the time, I was like...
Real quick here, let me pause. So Tyler is a pseudonym for someone she talks about in her book, American Cosmic. Tyler, I know who Tyler is, and I'm not going to be a jerk here and reveal him. If he wants to stay anonymous, I'll respect that. But anyway, she's talking to Jacques Vallée. She's talking about Jacques Vallée, talking about when she talked to him. As I said before, he was the originator of this idea that there are... that he was a huge ufologist, probably the most famous, perhaps the most famous in history, is in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The character in that movie, I can't remember the character's name now, but the scientist, the sociologist in that movie was actually Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée was not the actor, an actual actor played him, but Jacques Vallée was the real person that was modeled after. So anyway, he's been a huge deal. He has great arguments against this idea that UFOs are actual spacecraft from other planets. And so he's a great job refuting that. But he replaces that lie with an even worse lie. He says all of this stuff, whether it's angels or fairies or elves or UFOs or saints' miracles or biblical miracles, he says all of that is actually just this societal control mechanism to guide our spiritual evolution from beings from another dimension. Jacques Vallée is not saying UFOs are demons. That's what some people are confused about. He's not saying UFOs are demons. He's saying demons are UFOs. And UFOs are UFOs. And all aliens are UFOs. So it's a Trojan horse. Don't be deceived by Jacques Vallée's thesis as Pasulka is here. Vallée is probably the single person that she looks up to most. Anyway, there's a clip here I want to get to. I think it's coming up right here.
You got my book. You know, I was thinking, you got my book, Jacques, you know. But then I thought, what did we learn from Tyler? So I couldn't really answer him. And thankfully, I took too long to answer him because he picked up another book and he said, you need to read this book. And whenever he says that to me, of course, I'm going to get the book and read it. But this one was weird. So he showed it to me and it was The History of Satan. It just had these big words on it that says Satan. And again, if I wasn't a little bit concerned before, I was absolutely concerned at that point. I was like, you know, Jacques Vallée is handing me this book that says Satan on it. And so he said, look at the pagination. So I, looked at the pagination. It was 666.
Whoa.
Yeah, I thought that was so, of course.
Wow.
It was a really weird moment. And he said that in the States, we think of Satan or the devil as really, really terrible, right? But, he said that the French, they have a different view of it. And it's less sensationalist. That's what he was saying.
So right there, again, trying to dismantle this idea that the devil's even all that bad. I don't know where he got this idea that the French don't view the devil as bad. In fact, I do know where he got that idea. I've had viewers reach out to me, post comments saying, yeah, they know what happened to Jacques Vallée. He was a Catholic to begin with. He fell away, he got kind of all caught up in the modernist trends there, especially in France in that time period when he was young. And of course, the modernists in France and everywhere didn't have this view of the devil as evil, or they probably wouldn't have believed in him at all. It was kind of chalked up to symbolism. But anyway, Pasulka has got a very, she's Catholic, Orthodox Catholic, but she's got a purely secularly formed view on all of this. She doesn't understand, she's not grounded in sacred tradition, the teachings of the saints or the magisterium here. But anyway, this idea that the devil's not all that bad after all. Yeah, they're demons, but really it's not black and white. It's all just gray. The attempt here is to just do away with the Christian Catholic understanding of spiritual realities and make everything kind of gray. Make everything just fall under the umbrella of the phenomenon. And that's the word you're going to hear more and more of in the coming times. The phenomenon. Anything weird, anything paranormal, anything out of the ordinary for them is just the phenomenon. And the phenomenon is completely excluded from the domain of God, of faith. If faith touches on the phenomenon, it's only interesting. It's not normative for them. So there is nothing, and I've got a whole chapter in this in the book, but there is no other movement today or throughout history that is so poised in one fell swoop to undermine the entire faith. Everything. It's not just this or that. It's not just one or two heresies. They are attempting, as you'll see in the clips we're about to look at, they are attempting to completely reinvent everything. And the particularly diabolical thing here is that people capitulate to this, Catholics capitulate to this, without even realizing it's happening. as scripture foretells that in the last times there will be those who hold the form of religion, but deny its power. This UFO ET deception enables you to replace divine revelation with high strangeness, and it gives you a secular way to, it's not material. They're always, these ufologists, they're always bragging about how they're not materialists anymore. Okay, you've just replaced old-fashioned materialism with Satanism, and that's not working towards truth. That's out of the frying pan and into the fire. So the devil ultimately doesn't actually want people to be materialists. He loves that for the time being. The devil doesn't want full-blown atheists in the long term, eventually, ultimately. He wants people who realize that God exists and hate him. The devil wants people, his ultimate plan is to have you not disbelieve in God, but hate God, and instead worship the devil. So this movement, this ufology movement, is constantly bragging, ironically, and this is why it seduces in well-meaning Catholics. It presents itself as a remedy to rationalist materialism. But instead of replacing rationalist materialism with faith, it replaces it with the doctrines of demons, as we'll see. All right, so skipping ahead a little bit here in the video, I'm at the 32-minute mark. You might be wondering, okay, well, maybe so. Saying that St. Francis had a UFO experience, that doesn't exactly undermine the whole faith, does it? And then, okay, well, that's just one example of many. And then I'm skipping past others in the video where they talk about all these other nuns seeing or anything that involves light, as I said before, above you. They say, oh, that must just be a UFO. It's incredibly childish and banal, their interpretations here, and the way they ignore. The church has a lot of teachings on how to discern private revelations, apparitions, and various extraordinary phenomena. These supposed scholars in this topic don't seem to be aware of any of that. Anyway, moving forward here in the video to about 32 minutes, here's what they also want us to reinterpret. Let me click play here.
Get where you need to go through that. And do you think that the Last Supper was some sort of hermetic ritual? Was it like maybe a mystery ritual? Like there's a...
So you might think, okay, a Catholic here, the Last Supper, that's the foundation of the faith in a real way. That's the first Eucharist. That's the Mass, the source and summit of our faith. That's everything there. So any Catholic with even a little bit of Catholicism left is gonna say no. But of course, any scholar is gonna say, okay, they're gonna hedge their bets. They're gonna pretend. They're gonna phrase things that later they can pretend they were just reporting on it. Plausible deniability. Here's what Pasulka says.
Another religious studies professor at Princeton, I believe, named Elaine Pagels.
Yeah, I know her.
She's praising
she's great.
She wrote Beyond Belief.
Yeah, she's great.
She
Beyond
talks
Belief.
About
How does
the
that
Gospel
sound?
of Thomas.
Yeah.
And how
fake gospel. The ufologists are all about the apocryphal fake works, the Book of Enoch, the Gospel of Thomas. Those are, of course, fake. They're not fake. They're real. They're apocryphal. They're not authentic divine revelations.
Jesus takes Thomas aside, whispers secret words to him. And maybe the whole thing, even if you read the Book of John, the whole thing, there's a reading of it where the whole thing feels a little more choreographed than you might expect.
Yeah.
And so do you think maybe the wine was like the kekion, this Greek drink spiked with ergot, that maybe...
That's the precious blood of Jesus Christ, the new and eternal covenant in his blood. Do you think that was just a hermetic ritual do you think it was just a Greek drink spiked with a drug, he says?
Allowed him to see beyond the veil. And then there's this other sort of this, we're getting deep conspiracy territory, but I'm friends with Randall Carlson and Brian Muraresku, and they suspect maybe Jesus never died, and Joseph of Arimathea actually just took Jesus in, who was life.
What does Scripture say? If Christ is not raised, your faith is vain. If Jesus didn't die, then he also wasn't raised. And this right here in the video that I signed into Twitter real quick. I'm avoiding it for Advent here, but I signed in to see what's going on. I got all these Catholics gobbling this up, promoting Pasulka and her works. We got Pasulka herself promoting this video where the essence of the faith is completely undermined in the name of ufology. Saying that, oh no, Christ, he didn't actually die. We've all heard these bogus theories before, and they're of course ridiculous. He did die and he was raised from the dead, but what does promoted here.
When Pilate sort of poked him, but actually resuscitated him with earth.
Of course, it wasn't Pilate that speared him. It was Longinus. Anyway, as usual with these people, they don't know the first thing about Scripture or the faith, but they love pretending that they're knowledgeable enough to undermine it completely.
This is probably all very heretical for your religious studies professor. So if you feel like you need to say this is bullshit, please just let me know. But
Elaine Pagels also studies. Yeah, so she studies heretic.
What's the answer? No, not to refute any, not to deny it. It's just, oh yeah, I study all this. Just
yeah.
Okay. Well, so is there any?
We don't have any. We're not like practitioners, or if we are, we don't bring it into our work.
Another ad. My goodness, I can't believe how many ads they're showing us here. It looks pretty pagan here. What they're showing us, that's fitting. Anyway, let me mute that. Let the ad play through. So what do we have here? This is just one example. You know, this just happens to be the latest thing that's come across my feed as I'm making this video here. There's been a constant deluge of material exactly like this. This just happens to be the latest. For the last 76 years, in the name of ufology, it is a constant attempt to undermine the essence of the faith. All of it. As I said before, no good fruits, all diabolical, rotten fruits. I prove this section after section after section in the book, and you really want to see that. It's might be tempting to skip through it to save time, and I won't judge you if you have to do that. But once you realize in the earlier parts of the book there are no aliens, and it's a proven fact, you know, I think, well, why do I need to see the rotten fruits? Because all that we've seen the last 76 years is a preview for what's coming. And in these last 2 months since I published the book, that trend has been increasing. Okay, continuing on here with the ad.
Gnostic interpretations of the New Testament maintain the belief that Jesus actually never died, that the Last Supper was all more of a choreographed mystery ritual than meets the eye, where Jesus was sedated and then resuscitated. Take Luke 22:10. Jesus tells the disciples,
"Keep your eyes open."
And this is so diabolical. You know what? I should just skip through this. I don't need to review this all with you. He goes through the whole anti-Christian conspiracy that Jesus never actually died. This is all this weird ritual, and we've all heard this before. They're desperate to claim that they are still spiritual people, but just not in the traditional sense. They're spiritual, not religious. They love this guy who's this guy right here in front of you, who is attempting to overthrow the essence of the faith. He goes on to praise C.S. Lewis and talk about and say he's on the straight and narrow now because he stopped drinking alcohol, as if that proves he's some kind of a saint. Anyway, these people are great at keeping up the appearances of being Christians or even Catholics, even while their public lives are dedicated to completely overthrowing the faith. There is nothing else in the world that enables this like belief in extraterrestrials. That is the rotten wellspring from which all of this stuff emerges. All right, so just pause my recording there and decided to just get rid of that because there's no need for me to go through all of that in detail. It's not heretical. Yeah, it's heretical. It's not just heretical. This is not about heresy. This is about the synthesis of all apostasies. It's a complete overthrowing of the faith by a Orthodox Catholic scholar who I'm getting emails all the time saying, oh, I need to just stop disbelieving in aliens and defer to the people who have PhDs and are big shots. What's going on in the aftermath of this video in the 5 or so days since it came out? She herself, this proud Catholic, is promoting it, gushing praise upon this host, who's also, of course, hosted Grush, and he's this huge UFO promoter. We've got other Catholics and Christians promoting this. It's become utterly insane. The video goes on, this unbelievably occult interludes promoting them. He goes on to say the Greek gods are still with us. That's this other idea that gets mixed in with ufology. Any weird pagan thing eventually winds up under the ufology umbrella these days. Yeah, the Greek gods are still with us in the sense that, as Scripture says, the gods of the pagans are demons, and the demons certainly haven't gone anywhere, and they're coming out in droves today through this very movement. He goes on to ask her, are we on the verge of epistemological paradigm shift? They throw phrases like this out all the time. It's this kind of sciencey way of phrasing good old-fashioned messianism, but of course their messianism has nothing to do with God or with Jesus Christ, so it's ontological shock, it's epistemological paradigm shift, it's disclosure, it's phenomenon, it's all this stuff. But then they go on to say, the atheists and the religious are coming together. I think you'll find that at about the hour and 11-minute mark or so in the video. And that's phrased as if it's good in and of itself. And yeah, I would love atheists and religious to come together by atheists repenting of their unbelief and believing in God. That's how atheists and religious should come together. But no, that's not what they're talking about here. They're talking about atheists and religious coming together in their belief in the aliens, in their belief in the UFOs. This is why this is the synthesis of all apostasies. It's inviting everyone in. And it's letting everyone stay with their pre-existing beliefs. And it gives them a way to pretend that they're still whatever they claimed they were before, but it's actually inviting their heart away from their prior beliefs. Although with an atheist, they still remain just as problematically atheists. They're just now pagan atheists. It's weird, occultist atheists when they become ufologists. But anyway, with the faithful, it allows them to pretend they're still faithful, even though their heart is now away from God, away from Jesus Christ, and in the expectation of the aliens. All right, so Pasulka, as usual, she says, "Oh, I'm used to all this." Her overall take on all this is because I'm a religious studies professor and because I'm a Catholic, I'm used to weird stuff. So UFOs are great. I mean, that's she jazzes it up with a few fancy words every now and then, but that's what it all boils down to. She says, look, we've got all of this stuff in religion. We've got angels and angelologies, and she talks about Aquinas's angelology. And by the way, Aquinas is very much against aliens. There's this huge lie circulating around that you can use Thomas Aquinas to argue for aliens. I prove at length in the book that Aquinas's arguments disprove aliens. I show that his teachings, I should say, disprove aliens. And then the interviewer here, Jesse, he goes on to ask her, are we at the last revelational step of science? And then he says, I should probably try and find the quote here. Let's see. Let me switch screens here. He says that this seems like what we used to call divine revelation. He is outright saying exactly what I warned of in the book that came out just 2 months before this interview. They are presenting the science through ufology to give a religion which is exactly what once was the domain of divine revelation. They're outright saying it. And we've got super famous Orthodox Catholics promoting it. I mean, this is the deception. It's right in front of our eyes if we want to be honest enough to admit it. Let me see if I can find it here. Let me pause the record. Okay, I think I found the clip here later on. They're talking about a re-enchantment of the world, which, as with other things they speak of, is great sounding. I mean, I'm all for re-enchantment, get rid of materialism. In fact, I was speaking to Rod Dreher, the Eastern Orthodox author, recently, and he's writing a book on the re-enchantment, and I'm sure it'll be great. But he shared with me he's got a section coming up in that against false re-enchantments, and the UFO deception being one of them. But of course, these people don't realize that. Anyway, let's see what is said here next.
Are we on the verge of a paradigm shift, a re-enchantment of the world, a breakdown of the cold scientific paradigm that's run its course? Science has become the pervasive mythology of our time. It has a founding myth, the Big Bang, a miraculous event for which we don't really have too many plausible causal explanations, a teleology of primitive to progress evolution which makes us feel safe, and rituals that involve lab coats, beakers, and microscopes to gain deeper access to the secrets of the universe.
So I just want to pause there for a moment. Again, a lot of this stuff sounds great, which is why ufology is so dangerous. It presents itself as an antidote to the rationalism and the scientism and the materialism that's dominated for far too long. But instead of inviting us out of that error into faith, it invites us out of that error into explicit paganism, occultism, and eventually downright Satanism. Moving on here.
In other words, it has all of the elements of a religion. Yes, scientific breakthroughs require...
He's saying, they're openly admitting now what I've been warning of for almost 3 years and what I summarized in this book. It is a religion. They are presenting to us a false religion in ufology and alien belief in general.
Domain expertise, hard work, time, and diligence. But then there's a final step that no one can dissect involving spontaneous revelation. Whether that's Einstein constructing the photoelectric effect while bored at his Swiss patent desk.
So they're claiming it's some sort of spontaneous revelation that certain discoveries have come from. It's their pseudo divine revelation. But anyway, let's increase the playback speed so we can get to the real crux of the matter
Wolfgang
here.
Pauli dreaming up the architecture of the hydrogen atom, Heisenberg at Helgoland, or Dirac staring at the fire in Cambridge. This last revelational step of science is
I guess I guess that's going to sound pretty weird if you're already listening to my video on double speed. But anyway, there it is. The last revelational step of science is what they are now saying is here. This is the final revelation. Not that science reveals anything in that sense of the word. It's empirical. It hypothesizes and tests and measures, so on and so forth. But anyway, what's coming now is a religion. Pasulka, like Jacques Vallée, she's got plenty of good points. She just takes them and does the opposite with them of what she should. So Vallée realizes that UFOs are not ships from Alpha Centauri. He says they're from another dimension. So instead of realizing UFOs are demons, he says demons are UFOs. He just does the right observation, then draws the opposite conclusion, although he meant to, because that was part of the plan the whole time. Anyway, Pasulka is doing kind of the same thing here. She realizes, rightfully so, I've read some of her papers on this, she realizes that ufology is not, we've got a number of UFO religions, and of course they're all diabolical. But what's going on with ufology in general, it's not just spawning individual UFO religions. It is itself the new form of religion. She's right about that. But instead of seeing that as a diabolical deception, which it obviously is to anyone with a single ounce of Catholic or Christian common sense, she cheers it on. This is I guess what you get when Catholics just abandon prophecy and private revelation and spiritual life in general. They just look at things through a rationalistic. We should always be rational, but look at things through a purely rationalistic perspective and forget that there really are prophecies, and they will come to fruition. Scripture warns about the great deception. It warns about the strong delusion. It warns about the Antichrist. These things will happen. And there is not a single thing that we should have expected to see with all of that we aren't seeing right here in front of us. Okay.
Is inexplicable and irreducible, and it seems a lot like what we used to call divine inspiration. So what drives these...
Seems a lot like what we used to call divine inspiration. There it is. Now, I do want to give this guy some credit, as I talk a lot about the AI deception as well in this book. Almost everybody who promotes the UFO extraterrestrial deception also promotes the AI deception. You know, this idea that artificial intelligence is also going to become a person, rational. They call it AGI, artificial general intelligence. It's just as diabolical deception as the ET deception. It all kind of merges into the more general non-human intelligence, or NHI deception. But I got to give this guy a little bit of credit. He at least realizes that's not going to happen. Well, let's get to the very end. As you can see, we're at the very end of the video. I've skipped almost all of it. But the postlude here, they quote another extremely popular ufologist, more of an abductee, John Mack, another Harvard professor. And he's kind of up there with Whitley Strieber, who he's insisting aliens are here because of his own abduction experiences, which if you read them with, again, a single ounce of Christian common sense, you'll realize they were simply demonic. I mean, it's obvious, beyond obvious. I go through a number of those in the book where you can see that all of these are clearly diabolical. But anyway, let's see what John Mack says here.
Repercussions of people impugning conscience.
If you want to shatter the Western mental structures, the Western mind, so to speak, which is now permeating the whole earth in its materialist, dualistic philosophy, the way you do it is you take something that's supposed to be in the spirit world, because even in the West we can make allowance for the spirit world, and we can study it through mythology, through religion, through imagination, through poetry. But the one unforgivable sin to the Western mind is when something that should be in the spirit world transgresses and shows up in the physical world. That traffic is the cardinal sin for the Western mind. So it has great power to shatter the belief structure of the Western mind when that occurs. And that's precisely what's occurring.
He's saying it right there. And this video is unabashedly promoting it. The goal is to, quote, shatter the belief structure of the Western mind. The Western mind meaning, you know exactly what he means and what they mean, and what Pasulka means and what this guy Jesse Michaels means. That means the Christian mind, Christendom. Western being simply a euphemism for Christendom. This is an attempt to undo everything. So he's admitting there, okay, sure, Christians, they have a they have a structure, a mental, theological structure for realizing, yeah, there are non-human intelligences. They're called angels and demons. And so, and as Catholics, Christians have always known, they can interact with the world, and they do interact with the world all the time. But he's saying, no, the best way to shatter that, in other words, the best way to shatter Christianity is to say that's wrong. That you can actually have these other entities. You were saying they're spiritual, they're incorporeal, they're actually physical. And that's what he's saying with aliens abducting him. There's all sorts of corporeal beings other than humans who are also rational. That is the Trojan horse to undermine the entirety of Christianity. And why is it so effective? Because you succumb to that and you don't even think you're a heretic. Because maybe you're not. Because I'm not claiming there's not an explicit direct dogma affirming this. It's true. It's absolutely true that only man bears his image, but there's not yet an explicit direct dogma extraordinarily defining that. You can still conclude it with certainty, just like you can conclude that 2 + 2 = 4 with certainty, even though there's no dogma about that. But anyway, the point is, getting back to John Mack there, you can succumb to this idea and not even think you're a heretic without also realizing that even if you've avoided being a formal heretic, you've slowly but surely, step by step, become a complete apostate. You're still going to Mass. You still got the form of religion there, as Scripture said. But your heart is not at all with Jesus Christ anymore. It's with the aliens. You couldn't really care less about his coming again in glory, much less his coming in grace into your heart or his coming in the Eucharist or any of that. You're waiting for the aliens to come save us. And it's in one sense, it's hard for me to blame people who believe in aliens. It's hard for me to blame them for putting all of their hopes and dreams and expectations in that. Because, yeah, that is absolutely earth-shattering. It's a lie. It's a diabolical lie. It's absolutely false, and we can be certain of that. But I got to give them this with consistency. If that was true, if indeed aliens did exist and they're coming and they're here, that is the biggest revelation in the entire history of the world, with the sole exception of Jesus Christ. And if you're not a Christian, if you don't realize that God became man, then that is the biggest revelation in the entire history of the world. It changes everything. And anybody who's honest about the alien question for a second realizes that if there were aliens and if they're here, that changes absolutely everything more radically than anything else ever before, other than God himself becoming man. So, what do you think? Just back up for a second. You think God has just been hiding that from us in all of the thousands of pages of Scripture, in all of the thousands of years of saints and private revelations and church teachings and fathers of the church and doctors of the church and seers and apparitions and liturgy? Oh, yeah, God has just been hiding from the faithful, from Christianity, from Catholicism, throughout all of salvation history and sacred tradition. Just been hiding the biggest revelation you could imagine. And he's been letting all the false pagan diabolical religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, they're big in belief in aliens. The false religions, they've been right about the most important thing this whole time. And Christianity is the only one that's been wrong about the most important thing this whole time. Because Christianity, even the alien belief promoters have to admit that, that they're, of course, deluded. They think that Scripture supports their thesis. In fact, it refutes it consistently. But the more honest alien belief promoters, even they admit there's nothing in Christianity to support this. They argue that Christianity doesn't rule it out, but if they're honest for a minute, they at least concede that there's nothing in Christianity to openly or affirmatively support it. So the unstated premise in that argument, the corollary, the unexplored corollary, is that all the false religions, all the pagan religions, and Islam also, by the way, is very pro-alien. It's just Christianity that isn't. So the one religion that God himself became man, the only true religion, Christianity, is one religion that's completely delusionally wrong on the most important question you can imagine about God and creator and creation. And all the false pagan ones have always been right for all these thousands of years. That alone, that's just one of 1,000 proofs we have there are no aliens. But that one alone. And I just emphasize that now because it illustrates why this is the great deception. This is not just another heresy. It's not even just another apostasy. This is the one little lie that there's non-human intelligences, which they can use to infiltrate and infect every single aspect of the faith while seeming to keep up the appearances. Now, the thumbnail for this video that I've been commenting on here the last several minutes is so blasphemous that I'm not even going to show it here. It's an image of the body of Jesus being operated on by aliens in spacesuits. And the implication is clear. It's just that interlude that we discussed. The essence of Christianity, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, was actually not at all what the faithful have always known it to be. It was some weird thing where he was put in a swoon by a drug, and I guess aliens came in and fixed things up for him. So this, and again, this video, I mean, Pasulka herself, she's gushing praise upon it on her own Twitter. She's promoting it. I've seen all these other supposedly Orthodox Catholics promoting Pasulka to this day, even though she's, as you can see here, openly promoting the undermining of the faith itself. And if I can't call this out, what can I call out? I know I'm going to get a bunch, as I always do when I call this deception, I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail and everything. Okay, look, that's not going to stop me, of course, and it doesn't even slow me down, but I will take note of it. They're proving my point. What I'm doing here is I'm toppling an idol. And when you topple an idol, people get very angry. And the degree of anger that they have is proof that this belief the whole time was indeed an idol for them. If this was just one of a million random opinions they had, they wouldn't care that I'm pointing out how wrong it is. But because it has indeed become their religion, they're so furious at me that they're calling me a blasphemer for not believing in aliens and for not siding with the prestigious Catholic scholars like Pasulka and Paul Thigpen, who are saying that, yeah, aliens do exist. And there's one Catholic sci-fi author of a fairly popular sci-fi book. He wrote to his thousands of followers online. He said, "Don't read O'Connor's book on aliens." He's saying, "Don't read mine. Read Thigpen's." To which I respond, "Sure, read Thigpen's book promoting belief in aliens and read mine opposing it, and see which one you agree with. I'm not afraid of the truth. It's the people who are promoting aliens who are afraid of the truth. Think about how easy it would be for my thesis to be refuted if it were false. Like, it would be insanely easy. If aliens are here, which is what they're all saying, they're not just saying aliens exist, they're saying aliens are here. It would be unbelievably easy for them to prove that they are not demons. It would be unbelievable. It's not hard for anything that's not a demon to prove it's not a demon. It's really easy. It would be unbelievably easy for aliens to prove that they exist, that they're corporeal, that they're here. Any argument, including all of mine, would just evaporate like that. Like snow beneath a burning sun. If they exist, it would be so easy. So why are the alien belief promoters so angry at my arguments? It's because they realize that their own arguments are false. It's because they realize deep down that there are no aliens. And that's the only reason for them to be so angry at the arguments that there are not aliens. I, on the other hand, I have every reason to warn against belief in aliens because, as I've been showing throughout this video, and I show in much more detail in the book, it's a diabolical deception that is stealing souls away from salvation. So I have every reason to zealously caution against their arguments. If they really believe their own thesis, that aliens exist, and they're here, they'd have no reason to get even the least bit annoyed at my arguments, because they'd just chuckle at them. Just like I'd chuckle at my 3-year-old when she says something ridiculous. It's not a risk. It's not a danger. But they do get angry, and they do tell people, don't read Daniel's book against aliens. They say that because they realize that there aren't aliens. Deep down, at least, they realize it. Anyway, so it's not just Pasulka. It's also Thigpen and others that I'm not going to even give free publicity here to by naming. But as I warned and have been warning for years, it's going to get worse in the church, and that's exactly what's happened. More and more supposedly Orthodox Catholic scholars are going to sign on to this deception, so don't be surprised when it happens. You've been warned that it's going to happen, and it is happening, so don't be surprised. Just stay on the straight and narrow path of our Lord. So, this Soul Foundation, as you can see on your screen here, this is a big shot new foundation started at Stanford University, dedicated to what? Let's look at what their website itself says here. It says, confirmation that genuine unidentified aerial phenomena exist. That's the new word for UFOs, UAPs, but I don't change words for things. That's why I still call it Twitter and everything. They're UFOs, in other words, confirmation that aliens are here. Would be world-changing in every sense of the term. The Soul Foundation marshals intellectual insight. So they're trying to make it happen. They're trying to be ultra formal and scholarly and professional about it, and they don't realize that this has been done many times before, but we are indeed approaching the day of disclosure here, most likely. So yeah, this is a big deal. and they realize that they're a big deal. So they had this big deal conference last month after my book came out, over a month after, in November, in Stanford University of all places. And guess who spoke there? Well, Pasulka and Paul Thigpen. The operators of this deception, both in hell and on earth, the demons themselves, the devil himself, and their human collaborators realize how extremely important it is, above all else, for this deception to infiltrate the Catholic Church. That is the Antichrist's ultimate target, is the Catholic Church. So you're going to see prominence being given, and we already have been seeing this for a long time, but you're going to continue to see prominence being given to infiltrating this deception into Catholicism. So Paul Thigpen spoke at this conference, and what else is happening at this conference? Well, of course, as with all such developments these days, there's got to be David Grush. So David Grush speaks at this conference, although he did it through Zoom, I believe, and he declares what? He says the quotes that I read out earlier. That was at this conference here that Paul Thigpen and Diana Pasulka spoke at. He's being unabashedly messianic about this. If anyone ever had any doubts as to what this was really about, these doubts have been settled. Not by my speculations, but by the public statements of the biggest voices themselves. I'm not nitpicking here. I'm not just finding a few crazy fringe voices to try and make my own argument look stronger. I'm choosing the biggest, the most indisputably significant voices out there on this issue. And I'm just pointing out to you what they're saying. And what they're saying is exactly what you should expect to hear from the deception that heralds the Antichrist. So, these are just in this video today. I just wanted to walk you through just a few developments. Unfortunately, we're gonna see more and more and more of these. I think that's obvious at this point. That a few developments that have come into light since my book was published. But please acquire the book. You'll find a link in the description, and you can find it on Amazon. I'm going to have it available in other places soon as well. For now, it's just on Amazon. I'm working on getting it at all sorts of other bookstores. Also, as you can see here, for the first time, I finally figured out how to, I've had this YouTube channel for 15 years or so. I finally figured out how to like split my screen and get videos playing and stuff. So maybe I'll do more videos in the future. So please subscribe and click the get notifications button there. I think you have to click a couple buttons to actually get notified when a new video comes out. I hope to make more moving forward. Please pray for me. Be assured of my prayers for you. I'm going to have, I've got more I want to say above all about the divine will. That is the most important thing. But in order to do and live in the divine will, we have to not do the devil's will. And the devil's will is being made very clear for us here in this UFO deception. So there was more I wanted to talk about in this video today, but I think I've been going on for long enough here. I talk more about Grush and Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson and all getting explicitly apocalyptic, just like what we reviewed today. I'll save all that for a later video. So stay tuned, subscribe. God bless you.